Today, we are analyzing a passionate sports commentary arguing that the Cleveland Browns must name Shedeur Sanders their starting quarterback for Week 1 of the 2026 season. So, a key theme running through this material seems to be the need to embrace the unknown upside of a young quarterback rather than settling for the safe veteran.
Yeah, and I have to say, it really excels at capturing the emotional exhaustion of Cleveland fans. And it effectively uses Sanders' 364-yard Tennessee game to prove his high ceiling.
Right, it definitely hits those emotional notes well. But to establish why Shedeur should start, we first have to look at the alternative the piece sets up, which brings us to our first structural observation.
Mm-hmm.
The material's quick dismissal of the veteran alternative inadvertently lowers the stakes and urgency of the central argument.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Because the piece explicitly mentions Deshaun Watson, right?
Right.
But then it immediately waves him away with this incredibly vague phrase, we already know a lot about Watson.
Yeah, I flagged that exact phrase too.
Right, because by failing to define exactly what that known quantity is in the context of this 2026 season, the piece just misses a massive opportunity to create a compelling, high-stakes contrast between the two players.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you just casually brush past the alternative in a persuasive essay, the reader they don't feel the gravity of the choice.
No, they don't. And when I read that line, the "we know a lot about Watson" line, I actually stopped and thought, wait, do we?
Right.
And is what we know universally accepted as bad?
Exactly.
Because if you are going to argue that a franchise must take a massive risk on a second-year quarterback who had, frankly, a heavily flawed rookie season, you have to definitively prove why the safe option is completely unviable. We already know a lot about him doesn't inherently mean what we know is detrimental to winning.
No, not at all.
It just means it's a known variable.
Precisely. And that's the weakness here, is that the author is relying on the reader to fill in the blanks about the veteran's recent performance.
Yeah, which is risky.
It is a dangerous game because it cedes control of the narrative. As a persuasive writer, you never want to outsource your argument to the reader's imagination.
No.
You want to explicitly define the terms of the debate. Because if the reader's baseline assumption about Watson is even slightly more forgiving than the author's,
Right, yeah.
the entire argument for Sanders just crumbles before it even begins.
It falls apart. But let's look closely at the section discussing the veteran alternative for a second.
Okay.
Is there a risk that focusing too much on Watson might derail the piece into becoming a hit piece on the veteran rather than, a hype piece for Sanders?
Oh, that's interesting.
Because I could easily see an editorial note here warning the writer to keep the focus on the future, not the past.
Yeah, that is a very fair boundary to consider. And it's a valid reason why the writer might have been, hesitant to dig deeper into that.
Right.
You certainly don't want the critique to devolve into a negative rant that distracts from the core mission of promoting Sanders.
Right, exactly. You want to keep it positive.
But I'd argue this isn't about character assassination or turning the piece into a tabloid critique.
Right.
It's about establishing the schematic baseline the team is trying to escape. A compelling argument requires a sharply defined foil.
Ooh, a foil, yeah.
Yeah, because the hero of this piece is Shedeur Sanders, and the antagonist isn't necessarily the veteran player as a person, but rather the stagnant offensive philosophy that the veteran represents on the field.
Okay, yeah, that definitely strengthens the tactical argument. Though I still worry a highly cynical reader might balk at calling the veteran a total roadblock.
Sure.
But it's undeniably better to face that roadblock head-on. So to fortify this argument, the author needs to explicitly juxtapose Sanders' specific offensive upside against the specific limitations or, the recent trajectory of the veteran option.
Absolutely.
It has to be framed as a choice between two highly distinct styles of football, not just a casual choice between an older player and a younger one.
Yes, exactly. And the cool thing is, the author actually already has the perfect raw material in the text to do this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they just haven't connected the wires yet. They brilliantly brought up Sanders' 364-yard passing game against Tennessee.
Oh, right.
That game is the ultimate foil to a stagnant offense.
It really is. So if I were editing this on the page, instead of just dropping that vague "we know Watson" line, I would rewrite that paragraph to create a direct clash of styles.
How would you phrase it?
Well, the author could say something like, while the veteran alternative offers a known baseline of conservative, risk-averse checkdowns that keep games close but rarely break them open, Sanders' 364-yard explosion against Tennessee proves he possesses the vertical aggression this offense has lacked for years.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Do you see how that shifts the energy?
Totally.
Now we aren't just comparing two names on a depth chart. We are comparing a restrictive schematic ceiling to an expansive one.
It completely transforms a passive observation into an active tactical debate.
Yeah.
It makes the demand for Sanders to start week one feel like a schematic necessity rather than just a fan's wishful thinking, you know?
Exactly.
By defining exactly what the veteran lacks, you create a void that only Sanders can fill.
Right, but even if the author successfully proves that the veteran's conservative ceiling is a dead end, they still have a massive hurdle to clear.
Which is?
Convincing the reader that Sanders is actually ready to take the reins.
Yeah.
And when looking at how the writer tackles his rookie tape, the core premise relies heavily on abstract emotional concepts rather than anchoring the argument in concrete football development.
This is a fascinating pivot in the text, and it's really where the argument loses a bit of its structural integrity, I think.
Yeah,
Because the author accurately and honestly identifies Sanders' rookie flaws.
they do.
The piece notes that he held the ball too long, that he threw 10 interceptions in just 7 games, and that he frequently looked like a young quarterback struggling to process the speed of the league.
Right.
That is fantastic self-awareness by the writer. Acknowledging those flaws builds credibility.
It really does.
But the weakness emerges immediately after. The author then argues that Sanders needs to start in week 1 just to build confidence and chemistry.
Right.
The piece literally says, let me look at it, yeah. Give Shedeur the offense and tell him this is your team, go prove you deserve it. Because quarterbacks need confidence, they need chemistry with their receivers.
Yeah.
It sounds incredibly poetic, but it disconnects the problem from the solution.
It really does.
It relies on an emotional plea rather than explaining why live reps will cure his specific mechanical or decision-making flaws.
Exactly. Because confidence doesn't stop an elite edge rusher from stripping the football if you hold it in the pocket for 4 seconds.
No, it sure doesn't. Chemistry doesn't magically teach a quarterback how to read a disguised cover 2 defense post-snap.
Right.
The weakness is that the author is treating starting in the NFL as a psychological reward, or like a therapy session for the quarterback's self-esteem.
Yeah, like a participation trophy almost?
Exactly, rather than a brutal, necessary laboratory for skill acquisition. When you argue that a player with a negative touchdown-to-interception ratio should start just to feel good about himself,
Yeah.
you immediately lose the analytical reader who actually cares about winning football games.
It's like telling a musician to go play a live stadium show just to build confidence.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right? Rather than specifically going on stage to stress test a new complex fingering technique in front of a live, unpredictable crowd. The technical reason makes the argument bulletproof. You don't send a guitarist out there just to feel the warmth of the spotlight if their fundamental issue is missing chord transitions in practice.
Right, because they'll just mess up in front of a bigger audience.
Exactly. You send them out there because playing that progression at full speed with the adrenaline of the crowd and the sheer chaos of a live environment is the absolute only way to hardwire that muscle memory.
I love that analogy because it maps perfectly to the quarterback position.
It really does.
You cannot simulate the heat of a live audience in a soundproof studio, just like you cannot simulate the speed of an all-out blitz in a red jersey practice setting where the defense isn't allowed to tackle you.
No, you can't.
Practice builds a false sense of security for a quarterback who holds the ball too long.
Yes, so to fix this disconnect, the author must connect the demand for Week 1 first-team reps directly to curing his specific year-run on-field deficiencies. We have to map the cure directly to the disease. The writer needs to convince the reader that putting Sanders on the field isn't a blind leap of faith, but a calculated, mechanical, developmental requirement.
Yes, you have to bridge that gap between the emotional fan appeal and rigorous tactical analysis.
Exactly.
Like, how does standing in the pocket in week 1 against a live pass rush actually fix the interceptions?
Right.
That is the crucial question the writer must answer for the reader.
And they have to be direct about it. The author should explicitly state that taking live game reps is the only physical way to speed up a young quarterback's internal clock.
Yeah, the internal clock is key.
They should explain that giving him the keys to the offense isn't just about making him feel confident. It is a required schematic mechanism to fix his habit of holding onto the ball too long. If I were taking a red pen to this section, I would cross out the line about building chemistry and replace it with something highly tactical.
Okay, so what would that look like in practice? How would you rewrite it?
I would write something like, you cannot teach a quarterback to process a disguised NFL blitz from the sideline with a clipboard.
Oh, I like that.
The only way Sanders will stop holding the ball too long is by feeling the visceral speed of a live Week 1 pass rush. Giving him the starting job isn't about coddling his confidence. It's about forcing his internal clock to adapt to the speed of the professional game.
That is a phenomenal pivot.
You think so?
Oh, absolutely. It elevates the writer from a passionate fan to an authoritative analyst.
Yeah.
It shows that they understand the underlying mechanics of player development rather than just the emotional optics of it, you know?
Right.
It proves that the interceptions weren't a permanent character flaw, but a symptom of a slow internal clock that can only be sped up by live fire.
Exactly. Now, I think a skeptical reader might still argue that live fire could just as easily shatter his confidence if he takes too many sacks.
Sure, that's a fair counterpoint.
But grounding the argument in the mechanics of the internal clock gives the reader a logical reason to accept the risk. It shifts the conversation from will he feel good to will his processing speed improve?
Yes, and once you establish that logical foundation, you are setting up the reader to actually believe in the upside rather than just hoping for it.
Right, you're building a foundation of logic. So, assuming the writer maps that developmental logic perfectly, we have to look at how they close the sale at the end of the piece.
Ah, the climax.
Yes, and this brings us to our final point. The persuasive momentum in the closing section is diluted by a rapid-fire reliance on hypothetical phrasing.
It really is. The climax strings together a barrage of what-if questions.
Yeah, it's a lot of them.
Let me read the exact sequence from the text, because hearing it out loud really emphasizes how much it deflates the energy of the argument.
Please do.
The author writes, but what if he doesn't fail? What if the quarterback we saw flashes from last season takes that year 2 jump? What if the game slows down for him? What if those interceptions turn into touchdowns? What if Cleveland finally develops its own quarterback instead of constantly searching for the next answer?
Wow. 5 in a row.
Yeah.
It is a complete cascade of hypotheticals.
Mm-hmm.
And while I understand the rhetorical impulse, the author's trying to invite the reader to dream, to imagine a better future for a franchise that has, frankly, suffered a lot.
Right. The Browns have had a rough go.
They really have. But this specific phrasing shifts the tone entirely away from an authoritative sports mandate into mere wishful thinking.
It almost sounds like pleading.
It does. It sounds like someone crossing their fingers.
So that makes sense, but could the evidence also support a different conclusion? If you ask, what if, you leave the door open for the audience to say no.
Ooh, yes.
Structurally, asking a question inadvertently hands the reader the power to disagree. If you ask, what if those interceptions turn into touchdowns, the cynical Browns fan reading this piece is instantly going to lean back in their chair and think, well, what if they turn into pick sixes?
Exactly. You never want to hand the reader the weapon they need to dismantle your own argument, especially not in the concluding paragraph.
No, definitely not. The ending of a persuasive piece needs to function like a closing argument in a courtroom. You don't see defense attorneys looking at the jury and asking, what if my client is innocent?
Right.
They state it as a fact based on the evidence presented. When you rely on questions, you are asking the audience to do the heavy lifting of envisioning the success. As the writer, it is your job to command that vision.
Okay, so the structural fix here is to transform these passive rhetorical questions into strong declarative statements that actively project the quarterback's year 2 leap.
Yes, we need to shift the posture from asking the reader to imagine to telling the reader exactly what is going to happen.
We need imperative verbs. We want absolute certainty. Even if we are projecting a sports future that hasn't happened yet, the language itself must convey conviction.
So instead of asking about those interceptions, the text should command the vision. I would rewrite that line to say, watch those rookie-year interceptions evolve into second-year touchdowns when he finally owns this offense.
That is so much sharper.
Right?
Yeah, and for the pacing question, we do the exact same thing. We cross out the hesitant, what if the game slows down for him?
Yeah.
And state it as a definitive, inevitable outcome. Like, with a full offseason of undisputed first-team reps, the game will finally slow down for him.
It just removes all the hesitation.
Completely.
And that brings us to the final, overarching question the author asks about the franchise's future. What if Cleveland finally develops its own quarterback instead of constantly searching for the next answer?
Right, the big closer.
Yeah. If I'm editing this, I'm turning that into a declaration of arrival. Something like, by naming him the starter today, Cleveland stops searching for the next answer and finally develops the franchise quarterback they already have.
Oh, man. The rhythm of that declarative voice naturally forces the sentences to become tighter and more impactful.
It really does.
It leaves the reader feeling energized and convinced rather than, hesitant and questioning.
Yeah?
It matches the boldness of the core premise. If you're going to advocate for a controversial high-upside move in Week 1, your prose needs to reflect that same fearless energy.
Absolutely.
You cannot timidly suggest a bold strategy. You have to declare it.
Well said. This has been a deeply constructive breakdown of how to elevate a passionate piece of sports commentary into a structurally bulletproof argument.
It's been fun.
Yeah, so to recap our 3 actionable takeaways for the author. First, sharpen the contrast by defining exactly what the veteran alternative lacks compared to Sanders, avoiding vague dismissals to truly establish the schematic stakes of the decision.
Right.
Second, ground the abstract concepts of potential and confidence in the technical reality of speeding up his internal clock, proving to the reader why live reps are a mechanical necessity, not just an emotional reward.
Mm-hmm.
And third, swap out the climactic what-if questions for powerful, declarative statements of future success that command the reader's agreement.
It is all about taking that raw, authentic fan passion and channeling it through precise, tactical framing.
Exactly.
The foundation is absolutely there. It just needs to be anchored in the mechanics of the game.
We invite the listener to apply these structural and tonal edits and to submit their revised draft, or really any future sports commentary, back to the show for another critique. Until then, keep taking the stage and keep stress testing those techniques under the bright lights.